All right, folks. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This is a joint Firstup and ScreenCloud webinar. My name's Paul Martin. I'm going to be your host today. We're going to give everybody a minute or two to join. But in the meantime, since I have you all here, if you're comfortable, a fun little exercise we can do to get started. You should see along the right-hand side a chat box where you can type in. If you don't see it, you might have to scroll down to get to it. But in that chat box, if you're comfortable, can you share the roles at your company that fall into your frontline worker category? So an example might be if we have a comms or HR leader in attendance from a health system, one of your frontline worker roles might be nurses. So put nurses in the chat. If you're comfortable, I think it would be great to get an idea of, the focus for our wide audience today. And we also might be able to pepper in some specifics for the different roles that you all are thinking about when you're considering frontline workers. So it could be pilots, it could be cashiers, it could be nurses. Whatever industry you're in would be great to know. Don't be shy. Maintenance. Thanks for getting the party started, Michelle. Love it. Now they're coming in. Oh, we've got a lot. This is great. We're going to do our best to try to pepper in some references there, but it is great to see such a wide range of companies and roles and responsibilities and focuses. It's kind of the name of the game with this. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for starting off by putting in some information in that chat. I'm going to go ahead and get started today. So as a reminder, make sure you're in the right place. You all have joined a joint webinar hosted by Firstup and ScreenCloud titled Reaching the Unreachable, the Power of Intelligent Employee Communications and Digital Signage. Like I said, my name's Paul Martin. I'm going to be your host. We will do proper introductions, but before we do that, I wanted to start off with a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering today. So to start off, like I said, brief introductions that will include myself. I also have an esteemed colleague and partner presenting with me today, who I will allow to introduce themselves. Then we'll jump into an overview of the power of personalized communication, particularly via the Firstup platform. And that's going to kind of culminate in a discussion of digital signage as a personalized communication channel, particularly for frontline employees. Perfect segue to then review Firstup's integration with ScreenCloud for digital signage communication, cover some best practices in the digital signage space there as well. And then we're going to wrap things up with a short kind of fireside chat where I'm going to pick the brains of the aforementioned colleague and partner, and we'll get their thoughts on how best to reach every employee in the workplace. And we will also take your questions as well and address them then. So throughout the presentation, you should see on the right-hand side a Q&A box. Feel free to put any questions in there. We'll address them at the end. Or if you would like to hold off until we get to the end to put in a question, like I said, either way, we will address all of those questions from the audience, before we finish up the presentation. So with all that taken care of, let's kick it off with some brief introductions. Again, my name's Paul Martin. I'm originally from New York, but based in Philadelphia. So if you all are NBA fans, it's been interesting watching those two teams duke it out in the first round of the NBA playoffs. I'm pulling for my New York Knicks. Just don't tell any of my neighbors that. I've been with Firstup for about 2 years. And here at Firstup, I am the Senior Director, of Technology Alliances. And that means that I have the privilege to work with our customers, work with my colleagues, work with other folks in the industry and in the market to really find out what products are being used alongside the Firstup platform, figure out how we can partner with those companies, and then also build integrations with those products to make it easier for customers to use them alongside Firstup. And as we're going to be covering today, of course, we heard a lot about how important digital signage is when reaching frontline workers. And I think we have helped to create a much better experience there by partnering and integrating with ScreenCloud in that space. So that's a little bit about me. Brittany, I'll pass things over to you, and then Johnny, you can introduce yourself, and we'll get this party started.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Paul. Brittany Barheit. I lead our internal communications, and I also oversee employee experience here at Firstup. I've been here for about 3 years. Love learning about the platform and how to reach people. I get to be my own tester all the time. But fun fact, I also was a customer. So I came to Firstup from a Fortune 500 company that had 65% deskless workers. I've been in manufacturing facilities twice, so very passionate about talking about how to reach those deskless workers. I'm so excited for this conversation today. I'll pass it to Johnny.
Hi, folks. So I'm Johnny. I've been here at ScreenCloud for about 3 years. I'm VP of Product, which means I spent most of my time working in our product engineering side of the business, but also get to spend a lot of time with our customers and our success teams, etc. And I can't say I was a customer of either ScreenCloud or Firstup, but I have had a chunk of my career as a frontline deskless worker. I've done a lot, from retail sales to trade. I've driven delivery vans. I've even been a wood floor fitter. So I've a lot of experience of being that guy on the front line who nobody talks to, or we all talk to.
Thanks, Johnny. You should have put those in the chat in the beginning.
Yeah,
that would have been interesting to have that added to the list. Thanks for the introductions, folks. So let's get started here. So to begin, I first want us to kind of put aside our day jobs for a minute, right? And instead, let's think about our consumer lives. And obviously, I promise this is going to tie back to our employers, our employees, and the employee experience. But just to start off, let's take a moment and think about the brands and the companies and the products that we gravitate towards as consumers in the global economy. And what we see play out in the consumer space is 76% of consumers say that they're more likely to purchase from brands that personalize the experience. And when we think about personalization from a brand communication perspective, there's really 3 things that are personalized. And keep this in mind because it's going to carry out throughout the presentation. So the first is message. So is this brand communicating a message that resonates with me personally as a consumer? The second is timing. So is this personalized message shared with me during an appropriate time for whatever is happening in my own life? And then the third is channel. So is this timely, personalized message communicated in a channel that I'm most likely to see it? And what we see play out is that the most successful consumer brands are activating individualized consumer data to deliver these personalized messages in key moments in each of our consumer lives. And we can look at an example here. So let's take this young couple that we're looking at. Let's assume that this young couple just purchased their first home. So congratulations to them, especially nowadays. What would a top consumer brand, in this example, let's think Amazon. What would Amazon do to engage with this couple in a personalized manner? Well, let's go back to that list, right? So first off, maybe they would share discounts on furniture products. So that is a personalized message for these 2 consumers. The second is they'd inherently be sharing it at the right time because they're sharing it with that couple after they purchased their first home. And then the third thing is maybe this couple spends a lot of time in Instagram, which I'm personally guilty of. I know most of us are probably guilty of. And so this is delivered through an Instagram ad. And what this personalized communication does for this consumer as a couple and for all of us in our own unique consumer lives is it increases engagement. So we're likely to go through that action that the brand is looking for, which is purchase. It increases customer advocacy. We are going to go out there and rave to our friends and family about how great of an experience we had with this brand is. And it increases brand loyalty between the consumer and the brand. We are much more likely to return to that brand when we have other items to purchase based on our unique moments in our consumer lives. So Now let's kind of shift out of that consumer mindset and bring it back to the employee experience, right? We've covered how great of an experience that was from a consumer perspective. But the problem is that same couple does not enjoy the same personalized communication experience when they're receiving information from their employer in the workplace. And really, most employees are not receiving a personalized message in the right channel and at the right time during their employee journey. This is indicative across kind of the global landscape. And we have some examples here during a typical employee life cycle showing hire to retire, left to right. We'll go through some examples of breakdowns. So first, right out of the gate, only 12% of employees feel that their organization has a, quote, good onboarding process. So again, from day one, day zero, there's a breakdown in that personalized experience and that personalized communication immediately. Then during open enrollment, which is, in my opinion, the most important annual moment in an employee life cycle, 80% of employees actually enroll in the wrong health plan. And that's not because the right plan isn't available. It's there. It's just that employee has not gotten the appropriate information through their personalized employee experience to be able to make that appropriate choice for them. And then if we move along to something as simple as ongoing communications, right? So for a group we're going to be focusing a ton of time on today, frontline workers, 63% of those employees feel that something as simple as ongoing messages from leadership don't even make it to them in their everyday. So if we think about a personalized employee experience and personalized communication, what is the lowest bar? Well, the message at least needs to be sent to the employee. For 2/3 of frontline workers, they can't even reach that low bar when we talk about the employee experience. And so what we see is employees are not receiving this personalized, timely communication throughout the employee journey. Britt, I think you had a comment that you wanted to throw out here.
Yeah, absolutely. So many of you are internal communicators on this call, and how many of you have said, well, I sent an email, right? Well, lots of emails go out and we are full of noise. And to the point that Paul was making is our world, our consumer world is so on demand, personalized, but then we just send that one email and it gets lost. And one of the interesting things I found through my years is EAP is a great example, right? Most companies have a phenomenal EAP program that provides everything from free counseling to elder care, child care, financial services, and they are severely underutilized. So a good, like an average is between 4 to 6% utilization. A great company has 8%. Think of how much wasted resources and money that could go to show your employees you're supporting them during those moments that matter. And so I think your example here is really powerful because think about when somebody has a child. It would be maybe a great time to send a message to remind them of childcare available, or if there's a death in the family. And so I think we really need to move beyond, well, I sent an email during open enrollment, or I sent an email at the beginning of the year about wellness, and think about sending those during the moments that matter when I say, oh, I need that. And that way I see it in my email. Or better yet, we think about those deskless workers who don't even have email access, which is over 80% of employees who are deskless. And how do we reach them? And that could be through digital signage or push notifications, or just thinking beyond that personal, but we go thinking beyond an email and going to true personalization like Amazon does, where it tells me in my kitchen it's my stepson's birthday, or it tells me when I'm in the bathroom through my Alexa to change my to reorder hygiene products. That's what we need for internal employees as well. So I just think the EAP is a great example because 8% shouldn't be great utilization.
Absolutely. It's all about those moments that matter, as we call them, and making sure that engagement, communication, content, whatever it is coming in during those moments. And so, like I said, what we see is that typically employees are not receiving that personalized communication, right? And so what does that lead to? Well, inevitably, it leads to low employee engagement. And this is where all of those issues that I just mentioned on that last slide, some of the issues that Brittany and I just spoke about, they tend to pile up, and it manifests in form of low employee engagement. So employees who don't receive important and necessary personalized information in their employee experience are 3 times more likely to be disengaged. Well, we all know engagement is important, but why is engagement important? Well, what we have found, what the industry, what we have seen play out across industries is that employee engagement is kind of the holy grail of business performance, right? Organizations with highly engaged employees perform better in virtually every business metric that matters. So one can assume if employees are not engaged, then they're not going to be performing in these categories. But you can see it, right? So highly engaged employees at organizations, less turnover, greater profitability, reduction in absenteeism, higher Glassdoor scores, higher stock price. I think all of us can look at these metrics and see how our own OKRs, our team OKRs and goals inevitably lever up to every single one of these top line business metrics. And again, the biggest influence there is having an engaged workforce that's ready to go to work every day, ready to perform, and feels as though they are empowered to not only do their jobs adequately, but to thrive in their everyday roles. Britt, I think you had another comment here.
Yeah, we're having great chat as well. So keep sharing and I'll comment in there as well. So actually I have my doctorate and I studied this extensively for my dissertation, read way too many articles on the connection between employee engagement and communication satisfaction. And what I found from many experts and also my own research during that difficult but fun process was that when people have really good communication satisfaction, that equates to better employee engagement. All the studies prove that. And what that means is exactly what you have on here. And so I think as communicators, we need to show our importance at work and how we're truly helping with less turnover, better customer service, less absenteeism. All of that helps the bottom line. And instead of just measuring impressions, let's go beyond and show how communication satisfaction is truly helping with these business outcomes. Very passionate about this because I think we undersell ourselves in communications often.
Absolutely. And so like we said, biggest influence is having that engaged workforce. And talking about personalized communication, which we know leads to high employee engagement, which leads to that positive performance in all of those metrics. Well, the lack of personalized communication is not because of a shortage of technology, right? So Okta released this statistic in 2023. It said organizations use an average of 211 apps. So you might look at this and see apps and products and logos that you use, but you might easily be able to insert different products and different logos that you have in your unique tech stack. But what's important is that this mass proliferation of business apps and different technology, it creates this confusing intertwined web of solutions that are all competing for an employee's attention. And they're creating new constructs and frameworks and habits that an employee needs to build or navigate in order to do something as simple as get the information that they need to perform better in their roles every day. And the reason that that creates this breakdown in communication is because all of those solutions that are already intertwined with one another, they're all technology-centric solutions. And what is a technology-centric solution? A technology-centric solution forces an employee to adapt to the tech. So maybe an employee needs to go to a specific platform to get certain information and a different platform for something else. Or maybe they need to navigate a specific workflow within a platform. Or maybe, like we referenced, email, right? Well, email can't be complicated. That can't be technology-centric. Well, if you think about emails that come daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, that aggregates a ton of information, an employee needs to know, and they need to build this habit to sort through that aggregated information in email to get to what they specifically need on a regular basis or what they need in that moment that matters along their journey. And all of that is very clearly, right, not a personalized employee experience like we keep coming back to today. And so what we here at Firstup believe and what we've built is an employee-centric experience. This means our technology adapts to each employee. So each employee is going to get the right message and information in the right channel and at the right time for wherever they're at during their employee journey, whether it's something that's standard or whether it's something that's unique to their specific journey. Firstup is able to consume a number of different data inputs, which we'll get to, things like employee attributes, preferences, and then it intelligently distributes content and communications into the right specific experience for that employee. So there's really no need for the employee to learn those new habits or to sort through processes or go through, a lengthy aggregated email unless it's beneficial for their specific experience. They don't need to do all of that to get access to important information. The experience that they're going through is already tailored for them and their unique needs and their habits and their attributes, like we mentioned. And again, if we bring all this full circle, creating this employee-centric personalized experience means that all of those metrics that we previously covered are pointed in the right direction because employees are engaged. And so that leads to companies are able to retain and grow their employees. Employees are more efficient in their everyday and can more quickly adapt to organizational changes and new initiatives. And the overall employee experience is improved at scale, whether it's for an individual, whether it's for individual teams, or whether it's for the business as a whole. And so to wrap things up, at least for the first part of this presentation, Firstup makes good on this promise of a personalized employee experience at scale by providing the first truly intelligent communication platform. And I think this slide really illustrates the power of the Firstup platform, so I kind of want to walk through it with you all today. So on the left-hand side, we see a number of inputs. That could be a specific message, it could be specific actions or initiatives taking place at a company, or it could even be something that seems simple, like employee data that's housed in a system of record. Well, the Firstup platform sits at the center and can consume all of those inputs. And it creates a universal employee profile for specific employees or groups of employees. And then it allows organizations to create personalized communication for each of those employees or employee groups. And then along the right side, that message is then delivered to each employee at the right time and in the right channel to elicit the desired response, whether it's action, whether it's update, whatever it might be. And so we can use an example that I think is very specific to what we're covering today, and we kind of highlighted it in purple on the graphic today, which is communicating some form of a change process or change management to an entire organization. And we'll emphasize frontline workers here. So let's just say that there is an updated safety protocol that needs to be shared with the organization. Well, the highlighted message is created in Firstup, and then that message is intelligently orchestrated via Firstup to be shared org-wide to every employee group in order to ensure that it reaches them in the right channel. And so maybe top right, office staff receives it in the Firstup app, but maybe a sales rep gets that message through a Firstup micro app, which is placed in Salesforce, because that's a system that they live in and breathe in every day. But for frontline workers, those channels probably won't work because they're not in front of a device during their workday, right? That's by nature why they're frontline workers typically. Well, with Firstup's integration with ScreenCloud, which we're going to be covering now going forward, we're empowering our customers and organizations to truly reach every employee, because we're incorporating digital signage as an additional delivery channel here for the Firstup platform. So for those difficult to reach frontline workers, specific content or messages or updates, those are automatically going to be sent to ScreenCloud, which are then distributed onto specific TV screens at specific work sites, depending on how you set up kind of your digital estate. And so this ensures that those frontline workers who might, as we said, they might only engage with those screens on a daily basis in their regular work life, they're still receiving key information in their personal employee experience, which includes those screens, but doesn't include other delivery channels. But again, at the same time, other employees, other employee groups are going to receive it in the specific channel to them that's going to achieve the desired result, whether it's an update or whether it's action. So hopefully this served as kind of a good foundation for us all today. We talked about the importance of personalization in the employee communication experience. Remember, that's in terms of message, timing, and channel. It's enjoyed in the consumer experience, but we're bringing it to the employee experience. We talked about how this personalization is so key to employee engagement, which we know ties to every key business performance metric. And then we covered how our intelligent employee communication platform here at Firstup, how we make good on that promise of personalized comms for every employee group, now particularly for frontline workers via our new integration with ScreenCloud. So by design, almost a perfect segue, right, to be able to pass things over to Johnny from ScreenCloud, who's going to jump into how our integration works with ScreenCloud, what that workflow looks like. And then he's going to share some best practices when it comes to digital signage as a communication channel, because as he said earlier, that's his bread and butter. That's where he's either been participating in or working within as a vendor. And we think he's got some really great insights for the audience today. So Johnny, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to you now.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we're going to start by just simply walking through an example of content being managed on Firstup and through the integration being displayed then on screens. We're going to take a really simple example following on from what Paul was talking about. So for those of you who are familiar with Firstup, you'll recognize this. You're in the Firstup platform and creating a campaign using one of many templates to create your content. And very simply adding in your title, adding in some content, maybe some media, and you'll notice that the author and date's already included in there. Then once we've created this, this campaign, moving out to the different delivery options. One of which is to tag it with a topic, and that's important for how we connect to ScreenCloud. So we've got this post created with the topic, and then that post obviously will go out to all the channels as chosen that Paul mentioned earlier. It could be Salesforce, etc. But then within ScreenCloud, we have the Firstup app. Very easy to set up. So here we're creating a connection with Firstup. Now, obviously it's multi-region, but and it's very simple to set up. There's a couple of pieces of information you need to know about your Firstup. There's an API key, but what's actually happening here is the connection of a feed from Firstup into ScreenCloud, and that feed is made up of one or more topics, which we've just selected. Then there's some configuration. You can choose whether you want, how long you want a post to display on screen, as in maybe a few seconds, but you can also say, I want it to play for 3 weeks or 1 week or a day. And here we then see the same content pulled out and displayed full screen in one screen. Those people who know the flexibility of how you manage content within ScreenCloud, you can automate where you want your content to go. So obviously it only shows on the appropriate screens for that content. And it'll also play in whatever setup your screens are. So sometimes it's full screen, landscape, or portrait, as we see here. But also there are times when it'll be part of a multi-zone choice. So that's showing you the kind of walkthrough of content from Firstup into ScreenCloud. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to talk through, I guess, what I would describe as the basics of screens as a channel within internal comms. We had a question come through the Q&A already. Thank you, that said, I came out of the digital signage industry and would be very interested in hearing more about how digital signage ties into an internal communication solution. Well, that's a great title for exactly what we're going to do for the next few minutes. One of the things I'm sure you're all aware is this, about buying technology is this. Phones are not getting cheaper. Laptops, computers, they are not getting cheaper. They are not becoming commoditized yet, but screens are becoming cheaper. And as a result of the fact that screens are getting higher quality and lower cost, they are everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Every work site we visit, even when they're not our customers, have screens on the wall. And often they're turned off. They're just black screens, or they're playing the news, or they're used every now and again for a presentation, but they are everywhere. And that proliferation of screens provides the opportunity to take a digital environment, so the world of Firstup, those digital channels that are finding their way into Salesforce and into mobile apps, and make it physical. It's almost reverse digital transformation, taking the digital world back out to the physical world. And these physical screens become the equivalent of location-based push notifications. And they become the information you need, or the audience needs, at that location and at that time. And it's not about what the audience is looking for, it's about what's best suited for them right now. And so it's the first thing people need to understand just about planning communication screens is that they're physical. They're bringing the digital to the physical world. And, hard to reach people. And they're not just those people who don't have a laptop or who aren't working at a desk. They can be people who are who are disengaged already, who are not seeking out the information that is available to them. And one of the beautiful things I love about the physicality of digital signage is that the only thing an employee needs to do is show up for work. They just need to be there. They just need to be in the location where they work, and they'll get that messaging. They'll get that important key information. So consider this stat on screen. And this is from a survey of around 2,000 companies in the manufacturing, 2,000 companies that have a significant deskless workforce. And we didn't just survey, we did this with Google and Chrome OS, and we didn't just survey the deskless workers. This result is what everyone in the organization was saying. Everyone was saying that those people who had access to the digital channels had better opportunities. And I think that's really important, because it's not just, and Brittany already referred to this, it's not just about getting the information, it's about that satisfaction that comes from that communication, and extending the reach of your communication extends the opportunity. And that opportunity could be training and development, but it could just be opportunity to be engaged. It could just be opportunity to actually enhance performance. So that's the first step, is understand the physical nature of screens and that opportunity. Let's go on, Paul. Super. Yeah, so step 2, I guess, is that it's not really just about having a robust network of screens. The content matters. And one of the things we focus on a lot at ScreenCloud is taking content that has been designed for another channel, for another medium, such as a social feed or even an email, perhaps even a PDF, and finding ways of transforming that content to make it screen ready, to make it compelling and engaging for screens. So signage comes in lots of shapes and sizes. It might be a big, bold message, or it could be a ticker tape along the bottom. And we're always committed to transforming that content so that it doesn't have to be reworked. I noticed in the chat earlier, people were saying a lot of companies don't have anyone or have very limited resources for internal comms. And that's what I love about this quote here. This quote from one of our customers saying that the fact that ScreenCloud transforms the information from screen without having a designer need to do it has saved them 65 weeks a year. And that's a job, that's a role, that's another person for your team. Just by not having to rework content for multiple channels. So let's move on to the third step. Okay, so this we've already talked a little bit about this. So we've said, we can extend the reach, we can save you a lot of time, we can make the content really compelling automatically. But actually, it boils down to it. It's about communicating with real people. It's about helping people form strong behaviors, form strong working patterns, get the benefits they deserve and engage with. It is ultimately about changing behavior, not just about informing. And employee engagement is so important, but it's almost talked as a kind of mythical thing and not a practical thing. And whereas we like to focus on, well, what change are you trying to achieve, or what's the delta here? What's the change, the drive? And these are the type of things people say is, well, we want our frontline to be more informed. And we'll ask, well, what's the benefit of them being more informed? And then we start working with them to achieve results. And they're typically things like this. Well, we've less time wasted in our warehouses because people are informed on the screen that deliveries aren't going to be on time. Or we've had a 20% increase in frontline employees getting the right open enrollment information and getting it on time. Or we even have had an increase in email open rates because it's been highlighted on screen ahead of time that these are significant topics in the next few weeks. And so people are waiting for it. They're anticipating the communication rather than ignoring just another email. So we see this all the time. Or another example is We have an increase in frontline workers accessing content, whether that be open enrollment or something else, via a QR code directly into the Firstup environment. So it really, one thing I think we are very passionate about as a company, that it is about delivering a change in a business and driving actual performance. And you can see from this little stat on here that actually, again, people do believe that it helps change performance, not just keep them informed. So I would say those are the three basics of digital signage. If you want to do digital signage well, those are the things to understand. And if we move on, this is, I get asked a lot of the time, and Paul has actually asked me this, so I'm not recalling him out. People want some tips and tricks and best practice, and we've got a wonderful tool called ScreenCloud University that we try to educate a lot of people on good practice for digital signage. But one of the things that I try to do is, if we can provide you with keys that help you unlock digital signage in a way that's not just a tip that you use once or twice, but actually really drives understanding of the benefits. And these, I would say, are for people who really want to kind of engage and get that change I mentioned. These are absolutely critical pieces of information. The first key is understanding attention. And there's been a lot of books written in the last year about attention, but at a very basic level, screens are big and bright, right? Our CEO refers to them as the luminous boxes on the wall. But if I have, there's the research, we did some research with UCL, and one of the things it came up with, it uncovered was that if you have a small screen near you and a very large screen far away, the large screen, even though it's taking up just as much space in your visual areas, even though that's happening, the large screen far away will get more of your attention. So that's, I was in a customer's, I was visiting a customer recently, and as I walked out, I noticed a box for a 98-inch screen for one of their meeting rooms. So that grabs attention. The second key to really understanding digital signage is understanding how screens drive retention. Why do we say this? This is something we've all said. We've all said, where did I see that? And the reason we say that is because our recollection and our recall is tied to the physical world. I can remember that point I was walking my dog when I heard that really insightful fact on the podcast. I tie it to that point. I know where I was when I heard it. And here's a question for you. How many of you, since in the 38 minutes since we've started, and we're nearly finished, but in the 38 minutes since we've started, how many of you have scrolled on your phone? Many have looked at a LinkedIn post, scrolled down a feed of some sort. I guarantee there would be a high number. But if I asked how many of you can tell me what it was you saw, your recall would be very poor. Because you don't associate your phone with a location, you associate it as part of you, it belongs to you. So your retention is actually poorer. So people recall information when they associate it with being in a specific place, and that's one of the reasons screens have such a powerful communication tool. And then finally, cognition. We've all had a conversation with someone who we know they're not listening. In fact, we've all been that person who's not really listening because we're thinking of what we're going to say next. Screens and passive communication actually gets past that. Whenever you see communication in an interactive device, you're thinking, do I swipe left? Do I swipe right? What do I do? And we all need that engagement. We all know how important that is. But actually, in terms of understanding stuff, whenever you are given passive messaging, your brain is in understand mode. It's trying to get to grips with what that means rather than what do I need to do. So we've seen lots of studies and lots of work that shows how much people understand content better if they're given opportunities to explore it passively. So those I would say are really key. And I'll finish on this. From a point of view of tips and tricks for internal comms and signage, the big questions are this: where do you struggle to gain attention? For what topic do you find there is low retention? What do people forget about? And thirdly, what do people not seem to understand? And you design your content strategy around achieving those objectives of attention, retention, and cognition. And that drives the engagement. I'll give you one last example. I have heard a CEO say, "I feel people don't understand our strategy." And I'm like, okay, that feels to me like an opportunity to break it down in smaller chunks and make sure everyone gets a nugget of strategy every week. And they'll start to retain it, it will get their attention, and they'll start to understand it little by little by little. Yeah, so hopefully that was both interesting, learning about the connection, first of all, and kind of getting our heads a little bit into some of the theory that actually works for using digital signage to communicate with employees.
Wonderful. Thank you, Johnny. That was fantastic. And so now, with about 19 minutes left, we are moving on to the final part of our presentation, where we'll have a little bit of a fireside chat. I have a few questions that I want to queue up for Britt and Johnny respectively. And then we're going to sort through all of the great chats and questions that you all have been throwing into On24, our webinar platform. And we'll make sure that we get to as many of those as possible. I also will add that if we aren't able to get to your question, that does not mean that we won't ever answer it. We will make sure that we answer it in some form of a follow-up. We will keep record of the questions that are outstanding, and we'll make sure that we get you the information. In particular, some questions are a little specific, so they might not be applicable to the audience. So that might be an example of a question that we decide to table for further follow-up. But having said that, Brittany and Johnny, you're both there. You're both ready for some questions? Give me a check-in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so Brittany, you're first up. So my question for you, do you have any thoughts on how our audience can help little c communicators better reach frontline employees in a scalable way when these leaders may not have comms or tech-specific experience in this space? And for our audience, little c communicators, quote unquote, is our term for usually functional leaders who don't formally sit with comms or HR, but they lead a team or they have some kind of a role that means that they still have to communicate with a group of employees on a regular basis. Britt, any thoughts
thank you
there?
for that. No, that you just described them. So thank you. That's how I was going to start out. So yeah, definitely. When we were at our my previous company, we used Firstup as a platform, and one of the reasons we brought it in was to connect those deskless workers. We had about 65% deskless out of 19,000 employees. And we thought, okay, news feed, push notifications, that will help. And the next part of our strategy was looking at digital signage. And what I think is really important for those little c communicators, as you mentioned, they communicate every day. They often are the lifeblood of, let's take a retail place or a manufacturing company, right? We have one in Denver. And so what we did was we set them up with their own, what we call topics at Firstup, a targeted place where they could put all their information. Because when we did a focus group, we found out they want to know about the cafeteria menu for the week, safety, if there's a town hall locally. And so we set up a place for that. But that was already giving this little c communicator an additional job, right? They had to go into the platform, post that information. Well, now we also want them to run their digital signage because we want it to be personalized. Whether they get on their phone, they work on email, or they walk by a sign in the cafeteria, we want them to see the menu. We want them to see the recognition, the employee of the month. And so having the little c communicator go into what was shown earlier, one platform where you have templates already pre-made and you don't have to teach them to go into a digital signage platform, a comms platform, also send out an email, I think is is really important. And that's where I think a more formal communications team can help. They can help with training, they can help with templates, they can help with best practices so that these people are doing it for 5 minutes a day in one place. I think it's really important.
Wonderful. Totally agree with you there, Brittany. Johnny, my question for you. What are some common challenges that organizations face when implementing digital signage solutions, either software or hardware, for deskless workers? And how can they overcome those challenges? How can they mitigate any risks and still see success in that scenario?
Yeah, so I would say there's one clear answer. If we were having a poll, there would be one big question, and that's the hardware problem. Hardware and software for digital signage is just very different to anything else that companies deal with. It's just a different tech stack. So there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of nerves around security, and there is a real challenge around cost, not because of the cost of the devices, but an IT team hate the idea of having to send someone to a site to set up a screen and configure it. And then if it's not working, the IT team will be the people that get a call to say, hey, this screen isn't working. So that's the first challenge that really people face. And I think we've worked hard to overcome that. I think that the first challenge there, or the way to overcome that, is to recognize you don't need to change your technology stack. You don't need to introduce a new digital signage player if you don't want to. If you're a Chrome house or a Windows house or we provide players that address all of those. So I think making choices first, making good choices at the beginning in terms of rollout. I don't want to make it a sales pitch, but that's the problem. That's the problem. It's people face, this is going to take me a year to roll out, and we just make sure that we've got a team dedicated to make sure that happens. And I had a lovely quote a few weeks ago. I was on site with a customer, and they said to me they have many hundreds of screens rolled out since the beginning of the year, and they said to me it's the fastest thing we've seen roll out since Microsoft Teams and COVID. And he said that nothing has ever been as fast as this rollout. So I think that's it. I would say the mitigation is good planning, a project manager on the team to help you, and just making some good tech choices right up front.
Wonderful. Johnny, I wanted to throw really quickly at you a question that's kind of related there. I think it's a good way to throw it in. It came from the chat, which was, what are some ideal places that we should be thinking about placing digital signage in a workplace? And I know that could probably be a wide range, but give us your best immediate thoughts there.
Yeah, I think the approach we would take there would be, you first of all need to identify your audience. Okay, so it's dwell on the audience first, not location first. And it's only when you really understand your audience. So understand dwell time, understand flows. So and it doesn't just translate into where you put your screen, it translates onto what content you put onto what screen. So examples I would suggest is, like, again, this is from a customer visit from a few weeks ago, and they've got a screen right in front of the printer. And you would think, you're trying to avoid, digital signage reduces printing. But if you know your audience prints a lot of stuff every week, then the screen in front of the printer, when they've got nothing else to do other than shuffle paper, is a perfect time to communicate with them. The cafeteria, the break lines for the cafeteria, we actually have noticed that you can set a screen in a break line where people are allowed their mobile phones. And many manufacturing sites, they don't have their phones there, but they have their phone in a queue, and they can, if your sign says in 2 minutes you can have completed this, scan here, they'll have done that thing you'll have just increased your conversion rate while they're waiting in the queue. So it really is about understanding audience, your audience flows. And the last thing I would say there is that when it comes to screens for internal communication, they get very powerful when the screens are multi-purpose, right? Often channels are best when they're single purpose. Screens are best when they're multi-purpose. So we find a really good placement of a screen is at the end of a production line where you're seeing stats, right? And you're seeing the 4 numbers that everyone on that line needs to know, okay? But as well as saying those 4 numbers, they're saying that really important comms that you put out today. So it's understanding your audience and understanding what's the best way you can help that audience at that location.
Makes total sense to me. I think your deliberate approach to answering that question makes sense. It's hard to provide a blanket answer. So it's kind of like, hey, how do you get back to the first principles here of the specific employees that you want to engage with and work through it that way? Last question I have, and then we're going to go to the audience. This is for both Johnny and Brittany. Brittany, we're going to start with you. And actually, this is applicable because I saw a lot of questions in the chat around data, analytics, engagement, right? So the question is, in what ways does data, analytics, feedback mechanisms in comms and digital signage help organizations to understand the impact and the effectiveness of their engagement with deskless workers, and how can this data be leveraged for continuous improvement? So Brittany, any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Data is key. I think through focus groups, surveys, I mentioned earlier that when we launched the platform at my previous company, what was funny was we prepared all these beautiful pieces and flyers, and we went to then the manufacturing offices and facilities to find out what they needed. And they're like, oh, we never use what you send us. Here's ours. And it was like word clip art. And this is what we really care about. And so it's really important to listen to the people who are on site, who know the culture. So data, and it was said really well, like start with the audience, learn your personas, learn what they care about, learn what they want to know. In regards to digital signage, I really think, I found this fun fact when I was researching for this. I know people are visual learners, but I didn't know it was this high. 65%, some of the stats came back, are visual learners. And so how can we use that to grab their attention really quick? And some of the ways we were looking at measuring digital signage in my experience at both of my companies, foot traffic, that at least helps you understand, did people change direction? Did you get more traction? How many impressions did you get? That's a basic level. But then you can take it a step further and look at audience engagement. Was there a QR code that you wanted them to do an action? Did they interact with it in some way if you had interaction involved? Conversion rates, are you asking them to do something, complete a training, attend something, to look to see if the desired action, since that's often the point of communication, took place? If you want to go this step further, which I think is really cool, but you have to watch out for privacy, look at facial recognition, demographics, and then again, just surveys and feedback. Ask the question, what do you care about? What do you want to know? Do A/B testing. Which one made more sense to you? Which one grabbed your attention? I really think the more we can keep learning and iterating is key.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that. And I even would jump on a couple of those. You mentioned QR codes. So we obviously use QR codes a lot. But we actually built our own QR code generating service, which I remember the first time it was suggested to me, I thought that seems a little strange because there are 5,000 of them available. But there's a very specific reason we built our own, because when you scan a QR code on a ScreenCloud screen, that QR code is unique, not to that piece of content, it's unique to that piece of content showing on that screen. So you actually can do A/B testing without asking people. You can put 2 different sets of content up and you will get feedback via the QR codes, how many people engaged with this versus how many people engaged with that. But not only that, you'll be able to see how many people engaged in one location versus another location on the same content or at a different time. Or so you actually get really quite granular insights on the QR codes, which is really helpful. There's another thing. There's another approach to measuring ROI that I've only ever really just found when working in kind of consultancy environments, and that is actually looking at behavior change. And this, people get fed up of me talking about it, but you actually can measure behavior change and you can create heuristics. Like, I'm going to give a very UK-based example here. Well, it's not. It applies to the States and elsewhere. We see lots of stats around how many people are watching a certain TV show. And are they measuring how many people are watching that TV show? No, they're not. They create a heuristic via a survey. So they survey 10,000 people and find, or they have set-top boxes, or they have different ways, but they're not measuring everyone. So you can actually create content that drives a behavior change. So one that I saw done really well was literally just signing up to a survey. So signing up to a survey is a very easy step to take. You can see how much behavior was driven. So for some things that you can't measure, you can make judgment calls based on how many people normally engage with a piece of content. My favorite one, and I'll finish there, was a company had a lovely big campus and they got fed up with people driving their cars really fast. And so they literally just started, because they actually had speed cameras. So they started just using the digital signage just to get people to slow down. And the digital signage wasn't out, where you were driving. It was one of the things that went on their digital signage, and it worked. They were able to show exactly how many people were driving slower. So you can create behavior analysis heuristics as well.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting is the ability to perform that analysis on the new behaviors that are created too is all about how you're getting to what's the impact that I'm driving. Okay, so we have 5 minutes here. I'm going to take some questions from the Q&A. The first one that I wanted to do was, it was a good piggyback on what you said recently, Johnny, when you were talking about QR codes. There was a question from the audience that asked about, hey, how can I get more how can my employees get more information on poster content that is being shared on digital signage? And I think I'm going to take that one because it's a great reference to the integration that we've built. And basically the way that it works is the following. So if a customer is using Firstup and ScreenCloud, and Firstup content or posts are flowing from Firstup onto ScreenCloud digital screens, you have the option as a customer to include QR codes, as you said, Johnny. And so if an employee is walking by a screen, they see a post, which essentially takes Firstup content and turns it into a billboard, right? It's got the title, the subheader, and then an immediate information and an image. If I'm an employee and I need more information, let's say it's reminder, open enrollment is occurring. Well, that QR code, I can scan it with my phone, and it will take me within the Firstup app, if I'm using it, it will take me to that post, which can have a lot more information in it within the Firstup app than can be displayed on that digital billboard through the ScreenCloud solution. And so we find that that's super effective for organizations that are using both of our solutions, because it really does take super detail-rich Firstup posts, turns it into that digital billboard, and then allows employees to go deeper via a QR code if they want to get more information on something specifically. So hopefully that answered the question that we had in the chat there. I wanted to, Johnny, maybe cue you up with one that's a really good question. It had to do a little bit with kind of the features and the functionality, kind of technically speaking, of ScreenCloud. I'm sorting through this chat really quickly. Actually, you know what? It disappeared on me. So I'm going to pivot instead, and I am going to queue up a question that we had in the chat that I'm also going to take. I'm sorry to steal some time from you all, but Linda Bergman asked, how do I encourage my HR stakeholders to get on board with journeys? They're overwhelmed and see it as one more task to do. Linda's referring to our forthcoming Journeys product, which is all about taking Firstup intelligent campaigns and creating journeys for specific moments in the employee life cycle. So maybe there's an onboarding journey, or maybe there's a promotion journey or something along those lines. And what we have found is, Linda, your experience is similar to what other organizations are going through. What we have encouraged them to do is to pick a single journey, pick a specific moment that matters within the overall journey offering, and dive in on how you would build that within Firstup. So that if you're thinking about onboarding, right, how can you take a very in-depth product like Firstup Journeys and create just something for one moment that matters that will intelligently communicate with an employee to give them that, introduction to your company and all of the logistics and actions that they need to take. We find that for teams that might look at a new process and feel overwhelmed, which is a natural kind of psychological human reaction, taking that first step, making it bite-sized, is super effective for getting that organization buy-in and being able to build that coalition around a new solution like Journeys. Hopefully that was helpful. Britt, I wanted to queue up one question for you in the 1 minute we have here. It's from audience member Evan. His question was, is there any data on the effectiveness of digital comms versus paper? They heavily utilize sending mail to the front line, and they want to get some of our perspective there. Anything?
Well, I'm going to be so helpful. I'm going to say it depends. So it really depends on your audience. Again, each culture of an organization is different, whether they lean towards digital versus paper. It also depends on the message. For example, I have found that during open enrollment, it's good to have digital reminders to reinforce key messages or open sessions or deadlines tomorrow. But you need to send a pamphlet or a postcard to the actual home, because I find the partner often makes some decisions. So they help remind people, and people want to see a really full booklet, right? So it really depends on both the audience and the culture within your organization and the message. And we just talked this whole time about personalization. So take a look at your stats if you're cross multiple locations and do different channels. There's nothing wrong with different channels.
Yep. To piggyback on that quickly, I would say, Evan, at the end of the day, if you're going through paper, the way that you measure effectiveness is binary. Whatever that communication is promoting, does that action take place or doesn't it? And that's how you measure it. Whereas if you're talking about digital communications, we've touched on just the tip of the iceberg of all of the different ways that effectiveness can be measured. QR codes, open rate, response rates, right? Those are all things that can only be supported via digital communications. But if you're going through via paper, it's binary. Does something happen or doesn't it happen? So you open up a lot more ways to measure that effectiveness. With that in mind, we've gone over by a minute here, which is mostly thanks to the audience. You all had some great feedback and some great questions in the Q&A and in the chat. We obviously didn't get a chance to address them all, so look out and we will be responding and getting back to you all to answer all those questions that you had. But I'd like to take a second and say thank you to Brittany Barheit, my colleague here at Firstup, to Johnny Kirk, our trusted partner at ScreenCloud, for joining this presentation with me today and providing your insights. I also want to say thank you to the audience. Thanks for taking an hour and 2 minutes out of your busy day to speak with us today about Firstup and ScreenCloud and the power of personalized digital communications and intelligent communications in the employee experience. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Bye.